When I questioned the unilateral creation of a family card for his in-laws, Robert chuckled and casually responded, "Because they're my family. It's only natural for them to have a family card. Right? Got a problem with that?" His tone carried a hint of arrogance, a side of him I had never encountered before. Was this the real Robert, or had he always been like this? He continued, "If you knew who took you in when you were all alone, you wouldn't be able to say such things, would you?" I was taken aback by his condescending tone. Had Robert always harbored these sentiments? "If you're grateful, you should do more for my family. Then I'll acknowledge you as part of the family. Until then, it's like you're on a provisional license." The concept of a provisional phase in marriage was alien to me. Robert pressed further, noticing my silence. In other words, you're not yet a formal member of the family. If you don't like it, you can leave anytime. For now, our family is just the 5 of us. Useless parasites out. Without hesitation, I promptly canceled all our joint credit cards and moved out. My name is Emily Wilder, 27 years old, a freelance illustrator. Formerly a designer at a major advertising agency, I ventured into independence 2 years ago upon marriage, or rather, before I knew it, I was married to Robert. My parents had passed away when I was young, and my maternal grandparents took me in. When I entered college, I returned to the city center apartment where I had lived with my parents. The routine remained unchanged since then. I met Robert at the Italian restaurant where he worked. The place had a pleasant atmosphere, reasonable prices, and delicious food. My colleagues and I frequented it, and Robert, the handsome waiter, became a topic of conversation. The manager once joked that a significant portion of the regulars came for Robert, and I couldn't deny being one of his fans. He was undeniably cool, standing out in the crowd. For reasons unknown, we grew closer rapidly, evolving from casual acquaintances to a couple. Before I realized it, we were married. The details of that time seemed hazy, almost as if I were in a drunken stupor, waking up to find a man I called my husband beside me. Despite the uncertainty, I loved Robert then, and was genuinely happy about the marriage, prompting my departure from the company. After resigning from my position as a designer at the company, the transition to independent work was amicable. I shifted the tasks I had been handling at the company to a freelance basis. Meanwhile, Robert continued his job at the Italian restaurant, navigating varying working hours that occasionally stretched late into the night. As the irregular schedules made it challenging to maintain a usual work routine. And given my long-standing desire to go independent, I decided it was time to take the plunge. Robert, supportive as ever, encouraged the move. "It's a good idea, Emily. It'll be easy on you, and it's good to keep doing the work you love," he remarked. With that, our newlywed life began. Both of us shared a dislike for extravagant affairs, so we opted to forgo a wedding ceremony, choosing instead to register our marriage and meet each other's families in a straightforward face-to-face greeting. As our schedules fluctuated, with Robert at work and me managing household chores and freelance projects, we maintained communication and eagerly awaited each other's return for shared meals. It was a joyful and fulfilling everyday life that made me appreciate the beauty of marriage. However, about a year into our union, Robert dropped a bombshell. "My family wants to come over? Is that okay?" he suddenly revealed. Without hesitation, I agreed, thinking it was an opportunity to strengthen the ties with his family. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had always admired the idea of belonging to a large family like Robert's. However, when his family of 4 arrived, everything took an unexpected turn. "Hey, which room is mine?" demanded Robert's 32-year-old sister upon entering our home. Despite her initially polite greeting during our first meeting, her current demeanor shocked me with its rudeness. Alongside her, Robert's 18-year-old sister remained silent, offering no words and simply standing there. Recalling their reserved behavior during our first meeting, hurried along by Robert's sister's impatience, I led the 2 sisters to the guest room. Meanwhile, Robert's parents were directed to the room that had once belonged to my parents, a Japanese-style room, the only one in the apartment. I believed it would be in their best interest. After settling into their assigned rooms, Robert's sister boldly declared, "Well, since we're going to be living here together, you better start serving our family properly." Confused by her statement, I turned to Robert for clarification, only to find him laughing in a manner I had never witnessed before. It turned out that Robert's family had given up their own residence and moved into my apartment without my knowledge. Sorry, apparently our family home suddenly had to be vacated and they had nowhere to go, Robert explained casually. I wished he had informed me earlier, assuming their stay would only be for a day or two. This unexpected development proved to be inconvenient. Attempting to voice my concerns to Robert without upsetting him, I mentioned the inconvenience of the situation. He looked down and apologized, pleading please, just until they find somewhere else to go. Unable to turn away people in need, especially the family of someone important to me, I reluctantly agreed to live together on the condition that they find a new place as soon as possible. Little did I know I would come to regret this decision. Robert's family showed no restraint from the day they moved in. They did nothing and left everything to me, saying whatever they wanted. There was no effort to search for a house or secure employment. When I inquired about their jobs, I received another surprise. "Oh, I quit that lousy supermarket job," Robert's sister declared. Despite her age, it turned out she had only been working part-time and hadn't held a steady job since high school. Even Robert's parents were in part-time positions, having quit before moving in. Robert's sister, who had claimed to be a student, was actually unemployed. When questioned about her lack of employment, she shockingly replied, "Why should I work when I've become part of a wealthy family?" A wealthy family? Who was she talking about? When I sought an explanation, she pointed to me. "You, of course. You got a big settlement and insurance money from your parents' accident. And you don't even have a mortgage on this apartment. You can live without working," she said, laughing. Frustrated, I protested to Robert upon his return. But he responded with an unfamiliar sharpness. "Everyone's tired from suddenly having to leave their home. Let them rest for a while. Or do you want to kick out my family?" Robert snapped. Stunned, I froze. Then abruptly he softened his tone. "Sorry for yelling. I'm having a tough time too. I've been busy and tired today. Can you understand? Just a little more patience, please." Reflecting on it, Robert had a knack for navigating situations with women, using a blend of kindness and firmness to get his way. Yet, at that moment, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something had fundamentally changed. Unaware of the brewing trouble, I reluctantly agreed to endure the situation a little longer. The tyranny of Robert's family escalated, treating me like a servant at home and demanding money whenever they went out. Their plea for financial support came with the justification that they couldn't go job hunting without any funds. Reluctantly, I handed them money, which they claimed to have spent without any luck in finding employment. Accusing them of not seeking work would lead to accusations of lying without concrete proof, and Robert's family would berate me for hours. Even talking to Robert yielded no solution. "Just bear with it a little longer. I'll talk to them," he would say, attempting to smooth things over. However, as time passed, it became evident that my words fell on deaf ears. The frequency of their money requests eventually decreased, likely due to Robert addressing the issue. However, the money I had given them was never returned. After enduring this situation for about 3 months, I made a startling discovery when I noticed an alarmingly high credit card bill. Concerned about potential unauthorized use, I checked the statement only to find that all the charges were made with family credit cards. The expenses ranged from everyday items like food and drinks to luxury items like books, games, and expensive brand bags and clothing. Each transaction was marked with a number from 1 to 5, indicating the use of 5 family credit cards. Surprisingly, these credit cards were issued in my name without my knowledge. When I confronted Robert about this unauthorized issuance, he casually remarked, "Well, you complain when they say they have no money, so what choice do I have? Besides, you know who took you in when you were all alone, right? Can you really say such things to the important family of your benefactor?" His arrogant tone left me in stunned silence. Was Robert always like this? He went on to say that if I was truly grateful, I should serve his family more, and only then would he acknowledge me as part of the family. Until then, consider it like being on a provisional license, a term unfamiliar to me in the context of marriage. Robert, Noticing my silence, pressed further, declaring that I was not yet an official family member. If I didn't like it, I could leave any time. Now it was just the 5 of them in the family, and I was labeled as a useless parasite told to get out. It was at that moment I realized Robert's true nature and was shocked to my core. I contemplated divorcing him. I began questioning why I had married him in the first place, wondering if my initial attraction was merely superficial. As I headed to the restroom, Robert approached me, remarking, "You seem different from other people, Emily. I don't know how to put it. Mystical. Sorry, it's not something I should say to a customer." His unexpected comment lingered in my thoughts, and gradually I started to perceive Robert's subtle tactics. In hindsight, it seemed like a calculated strategy to make me like him. Recalling a colleague's jest about me being a wealthy individual living alone in a condo, I realized it was right after that remark that Robert initiated small talk with me. Perhaps he was after my perceived wealth and the condo. To be honest, Robert wasn't my typical type. To put it politely, he was modern. To be blunt, somewhat frivolous. I had a preference for mature men who could engage in quiet and serious conversations. Yet despite these differences, I found myself falling for Robert. It puzzled me how I, who usually had a discerning taste, could be swayed by his charms. He was the so-called handsome guy. He was a charming man, and it seemed effortless for him to captivate someone like me. Being inexperienced with men and new to the workforce, I reluctantly admitted that I had fallen for his tactics and ended up marrying him. This realization left me frustrated and embarrassed, igniting an urge to destroy everything in the house. However, I managed to restrain myself from acting on such impulsive thoughts. Instead, I made the decision to plot my revenge. To achieve this, I knew I would have to endure this life a little longer. If Robert had manipulated me into marriage, I would in turn take control of his entire family. The condo we lived in was purchased by my father with a mortgage shortly after my birth. At the time, it wasn't very expensive, but the area developed rapidly, and now it's considered a luxury condo due to the nearby shopping center. Although spacious enough, having Robert's family around proved to be a nuisance. Working from home, I endured the situation solely for the sake of revenge, as Robert's sister had suggested. The condo had no mortgage payments. When I was 3, both of my parents tragically passed away in a car accident. They were returning from my paternal grandfather's funeral when their car collided with another speeding vehicle on the freeway. Ironically, I was supposed to accompany them, but a bout of the flu and a high fever kept me at home. I became the sole survivor. The mortgage payments were covered by the group credit life insurance, leaving me with only the management fees and property taxes to pay. Upon seeing the amount, Robert offered to contribute a bit more than that to our household expenses, reasoning that since there was no mortgage, we should manage Emily's income, right? We'll each use our own earnings for personal expenses. It sounded good, and I acquiesced, thinking perhaps he had a point. Up until then, I had been solely responsible for covering all the expenses. I believed Robert's contribution would alleviate some of the financial burden. Looking back, it was a naive decision, but my love for Robert blinded me, and I went along with whatever he suggested. In Robert's eyes, he likely saw himself as the head of the household and my primary supporter, giving him the audacity to label me a parasite. However, the reality was quite different. I bore the brunt of most expenses: utilities, food, social expenses, and entertainment. Now, with the addition of 5 real parasites to my household, it had become nearly impossible to manage on just that amount. I yearned to rid myself of them as quickly as possible, but I feigned ignorance and endured the situation. I gritted my teeth and allowed Robert's family to freely shop, reminding myself that in the end, I would be the one laughing. 3 months after deciding to divorce, the day of reckoning finally arrived. Exhausted, I confronted Robert, presenting him with an ultimatum. "It's either me or your family." He looked surprised, but I continued without hesitation. "None of your family members lift a finger to help around the house. They just dump all their chores on me. I work from home. I'm not just playing around. Yet they treat me like a freeloader and tell me to know my place. Since you're supporting me, I've had enough. As I poured out my grievances, Robert looked at me, smirked, and casually remarked, "Then you should leave." Didn't I tell you before? You're not really a part of this family yet. Giving up like this means you didn't earn your place in the family. I feigned shock and looked at him, trying to comprehend his callous words. What are you surprised about? If you can't live with my family, then you're the one who has to leave. Oh, and since I'm not at fault, I'll take this apartment as alimony, and I'll take half of your savings as part of the property division. His true intentions became clear, and the revelation was shocking. Someone I once loved and married had aimed for this outcome all along. His entire family's harassment, their attempts to drive me out, everything fell into place. It was a bitter truth to swallow, but I made up my mind. Fine, I declared, deciding to divorce Robert. But this condo is mine, and I'm not at fault either. Robert seemed taken aback by my rejection of his proposal, clearly not expecting such a response. Reflecting on it, I realized I had always complied with his demands since our marriage, making me increasingly angry. I don't want to spend another second with you all. I'll leave now, but you should also prepare to leave. In disbelief, Robert shouted, "It's a joke, right? This is our home. We won't leave. Ever heard of residential rights? You can't just force people out who live here." Ignoring his protests, I left the house and sought refuge at my grandparents' place. I narrated the entire ordeal to my grandparents, explaining the challenges I have faced, and sought their understanding and support until things were resolved. They were shocked to learn about my struggles and scolded me for not consulting them earlier. Tears welled up in their eyes as they expressed concern. "Grandma, Grandpa, I'm sorry for worrying you, but I'll be okay now." Despite appearances, I'm not as fragile as I seem, I reassured them with forced laughter, tears welling up in my eyes. The day after I left the apartment, Robert reached out to me immediately, expressing confusion and demanding an explanation. "What's this all about? What are you referring to, the certified mail?" he questioned. I was impressed by the swift action of my lawyer to whom I had entrusted the divorce proceedings. I had informed them the day before about leaving the house, and they had arranged for everything to be delivered promptly. "I'm not paying any alimony, and I'm not leaving the condo. Just so you know," Robert declared confidently, however. I responded, "Legally, you have an obligation to pay, and you don't have the right to continue living in that apartment." I asserted my claim, stating that the apartment was mine as well, since we were married. "If you insist, then pay me half its value to buy me out," I suggested, countering his arguments. Such an absurd claim. Talking like this is getting us nowhere. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on. I concluded, ending the call. As expected, he called again the next morning, repeating the same line as the previous day. "Hey, what's this all about?" he questioned. Unimpressed by his lack of creativity, I responded, "What are you referring to? The card's not working." "What did you do?" I revealed that I had canceled the card that was mine, and since he was using the family card, it stopped working as well. I explained, "You paid the apartment's management fee and property taxes for just the first 2 months. It's not much, but I can deduct that from the alimony if you like." In response, I heard indistinct shouting from the other end of the phone, realizing that Robert had a poor memory regarding the payments. Regardless, I didn't care anymore, as I was severing ties with him. I requested him to pay his half of the living expenses I had covered and suggested dividing the savings properly as marital property. "I've kept a detailed household ledger, which I'll submit as evidence," I informed him. He reluctantly agreed to split the expenses accordingly, ending the call with a parting reminder not to forget. Another call came through with the same line, and I couldn't help but notice that not only did they lack memory, but their vocabulary seemed limited as well. The questioning continued, focusing on the perceived zero value in the split of shared property. They insinuated that I must be rolling in cash from my parents' insurance and alimony. Patiently, I clarified that my pre-marriage savings were not part of the shared property, and since we had no savings after marriage, the total naturally amounted to zero. I explained the situation, but their skepticism persisted. I firmly stated, "From now on, please communicate through my attorney. I won't be speaking to you directly anymore. Goodbye," and promptly hung up, blocking Robert's number. 2 months after my departure from the house, Robert and his family finally vacated the apartment. Not due to a change of heart, but because they couldn't sustain their living. Robert's income alone wasn't sufficient for a family of 5, accustomed to extravagant shopping with my card. Deliberately allowing them to use the card. I anticipated this outcome. Faced with financial strain, they pestered Robert for shopping money, resorted to stealing from his wallet, and blamed him for their predicament. Furthermore, I had arranged for the electricity, gas, and water to be cut off, since I had no plans to live there. Unable to bear the extreme conditions, they eventually left the condo. As for their whereabouts, I neither knew nor cared. Robert initially tried to tough it out, but gave up due to the lack of electricity and bathing facilities. The divorce proceedings progressed faster than expected, not because of a change of heart on Robert's part, but because he had cheated on me during our marriage. He had started making moves on someone, thinking he could kick me out. His infidelity became apparent when he bragged about owning a luxury apartment in downtown, luring young girls there. His family overlooked his behavior given his handsome appearance. Before leaving, I had installed cameras in various places in the house, capturing all the evidence of his unfaithfulness. When confronted with this evidence during the divorce negotiations, Robert turned pale and pleaded for reconciliation. However, having no intention of reconciliation, I demanded a hefty sum in alimony for all the wrongs he had committed. Realizing he couldn't pay, he borrowed as much as possible from his company, and I took whatever I could get, threatening to sue him for fraud over the family card. He reluctantly agreed to my terms, and the divorce was finalized. I found refuge at my grandparents' place, where I had once treasured the apartment my parents left me. However, after my parents passed away when I was very young, and considering all that had transpired, I contemplated selling it. My work as an illustrator was thriving, and I might decide to live alone again. Staying with my grandparents for a little longer, I intended to move forward with strength. Next time, I vowed not to be fooled by a man's good looks, and hoped to find a partner with whom I could share my life. Emily, my beautiful and intelligent sister, is our only daughter. However, I was left behind, a 14-year-old, unwanted and in tears as my parents and sister departed, explicitly stating that I was a failed, ugly thing. Always compared to Emily and deprived of love, my only choice was to desperately cling to my parents for survival. Little did I imagine that they would abandon me, leaving me to face an uncertain future. In my despair, I remembered my grandfather, who had showered affection on both Emily and me during our younger years. Seeking his guidance, I reached out to him, confessing that I felt abandoned because of my perceived ugliness. To my surprise, my grandfather reassured me, telling me not to worry, and assuring me that I wasn't ugly. Fast forward 6 years, and as my grandfather predicted, I transformed my life. Becoming a top model, I found success. While my parents ironically started asking me for money, refusing to yield, I had grown strong and had crucial allies by my side. Now 20 years old, my name is Samantha. My relationship with Emily, once strained, had evolved. We were close when we were younger, but as she became a local celebrity known for her beauty, our parents' favoritism became evident. They entered her into beauty contests, praised her, and neglected me, leaving me feeling unwanted and unloved. Despite the harsh discrimination, I held on to the happy moments with Emily, but our parents' actions reached a breaking point when they announced they were moving to New York for Emily's career. In a cruel twist, they revealed that they had no intention of supporting my education, leaving me alone and unprepared for the future. Desperate and abandoned, I recalled my grandparents, the once cherished figures in my life. With trembling hands, I dialed my grandfather's number, seeking refuge from the storm created by my parents. To my relief, my grandparents came to my aid, offering me a warm and loving home. In the years that followed, I faced challenges, transferred schools, and pursued my dreams. Emily, too, faced struggles as she pursued her passion for teaching piano. Our parents resurfaced, seeking financial support after squandering Emily's earnings. However, with the support of our grandparents, Emily and I stood united, rejecting their pleas and leaving them to fend for themselves. Now, as successful individuals in our respective careers, Emily and I celebrate our achievements together. Our parents are nothing more than strangers, and we find solace in the love and warmth of our grandparents. We live our lives shining as successful individuals determined to create a brighter future for ourselves.